Let's change things up a bit. For those of you who've been following my channel or following me on Facebook, you know that I like to tinker with modifying my tools. And I feel like I overall get some pretty good results, making changes to make them suit me better. So I figured I'd do a series of short videos updating some of the knives I've already reviewed and let you see where I've gone with them. And I want to start with the Becker BK10 today for a couple different reasons. First of all, if you've been following my videos on my Beckers, you know that I have a love it, loathe it, loathe it, loathe it, loathe it relationship with those knives. I cannot argue that the steel is awesome, and we'll take a look at that today. But absolutely hate the nylon stock sheaths. Absolutely hate those kind of painted on, especially the traction coatings that they come with. Hate the plastic grips. And, well, the skyrocketing prices. I bought mine when they were still pretty affordable. But not only the knives themselves, but we'll talk about the aftermarket accessories. Yeah, those prices are going through the roof, and they have a whole lot of competition. The other reason I want to take a look at the BK10 first is because, well, despite all the changes I've made, I still really haven't connected with it, but I think it may have a forever home that it's going to. So let's take a look at the BK10 and what I've done to it. Revisiting some of these knives that I reviewed a long time ago will hopefully also give me the opportunity to, well, hopefully do a better job than I did early on in my YouTube channel when I was sort of fumbling through these. But when it comes to the steel of my Beckers, we're talking 1095 Crovan that my 60 HRC test file has a hard time cutting into. So hardness may be a little bit above 60. Takes and holds an excellent edge, even survived a lot of abuse I did in earlier videos. But let's take a look at current sharpness against paper. Yeah, it's pretty sharp. Not quite shaving sharp, maybe a little bit toothy, I would say. Let's do it slow. Yeah. How about a little bit of cardboard? Wide blade, sometimes bind. Yeah, that's pretty nice. And yes, we will do some other tests. Now that I have a battery of tests that I like to put my knives through, I don't think this one's going to have any problems. Let's talk about specs and build. And, well, talk about build, we got to talk about modifications. Let's talk about the post-mod specifications, and then I'll break down the modifications I've made, and I will be making comparisons to the similarly sized but very different BK2. But the first number I'm going to throw out at you is one of my loathe it categories. About 7-8 years ago, I paid around 60 or 70 US dollars for this. Today, it's going for more like 110 or more is what I'm seeing it for. And yes, I did replace those cheap-looking and cheap-feeling stock plastic grips with aftermarket G10 scales. A couple of years ago, the scales cost me $35, which was kind of cringe-inducing because that was half of what I spent on the knife originally. Now those same grips are going for more like $50. So not including replacing the cheap nylon and plastic sheath, in today's money, I am about $160 into this knife. And for $160, what kind of competition is out there? All right, that's another question. But it has kind of soured me in my opinions going forward. I will try to be as non-biased as possible, and if you're fans of Becker's or the BK10 specifically, I apologize, but yeah, I got some bias going, which I will try to overcome. But basic specifications have not changed. The blade length, it is still 5.5 inches, about 13.5 centimeters. Blade thickness, still 1 5/8 inches, about 4 centimeters. Blade thickness with the traction coating stripped off is 4 millimeters. Grip length If I'm measuring the front inside the two hooks, you've got about 4 inches of space in there, about 10 centimeters. Overall length is about 11 inches, 28 centimeters, what I would consider a medium length knife. Weight, with the G10 scales on, 13.5 ounces, about 382 grams. Compare that to the BK2, which is 16 ounces and change. And that feels like a significant difference in hand. Now, what does this do to point of balance? Okay, between that kind of slim blade and the big chunky G10 scales, yeah, your point of balance is an inch into your grip. So yeah, center of mass is all right here in the hand. Definitely going to talk about how that affects handling and performance, but let's go ahead and talk about my modifications. Let's start talking about modifications down here at the friendly end. So I already mentioned a few years ago I replaced the stock Grivex plastic scales with these readily available aftermarket G10 scales. Now I've put these on all of my Beckers at this point, and when you do the math, that was a heck of an investment. Now this particular set was in what they call the natural color as compared to, there's also different dye jobs that you'll pay a little extra money for. This is the black set. But the natural set is sort of a tan. When it gets exposed to oils, including hand oils, it sort of turns to a medium brown. But what I tried doing recently was using some black dye on it, and it didn't quite uniformly take, leaving the grips with sort of a two-tone black and dark brown, which I guess is sort of attractive. Now on my larger, both longer and more massive Becker knives, that was an immediate massive improvement. Felt like a higher quality product, but also a lot grippier in hand, both in handling and use. So worth the money? I'm going to say yes, even though that price is steadily increasing. But on this particular knife, because of the blade length and the slimness and the weight and the point of balance, it just wasn't quite working for me. It almost felt like I had a slim little blade sticking out of a soda can. Just too chonky. But G10's really easy to work, so I removed some material, gave it some slimming, some taper to make it fit my hands better. Now my hands medium width, but yeah, I have really stubby short fingers. So you might not have any of these problems, but yeah, made it fit my hands better. When we get to handling, we'll talk about how successful or not I was at that. So what did I do to the blade? Well, the first thing I did was I stripped off that hideous rhino liner-like traction coating. And you'll also notice there are no more markings on the blade, and that's because, well, on my older Beckers, the ones with the smoother finish, those markings are stamped very deeply into the steel, but on this newer model with the traction coating, they were just sort of laser etched into the surface, basically into the coating. So when the coating came off, so did all of the markings, making this now kind of an anonymous knife. But you also may see some scoring on the surface of the blade, and that's from a couple of different sources. Firstly, this was the first attempt I had made at stripping off a coating like that, so I really didn't know what I was doing, and let's say I was a bit overly exuberant and scuffed things up in the process. But some of the scoring was already there from a couple of other sources. First one, also me. If you've seen some of my earlier Becker videos where I put my Beckers through a series of stupidly abusive, I hesitate to even call them tests, where I dug holes and chopped into clay pots and bricks and cinder blocks and concrete. Yeah. Outcome of that, surprising little damage to the edges and the blades, but the coating's easily destroyed by something as simple as batoning. But yes, there was some deep scoring in the surface of the blade from my earlier stupidity. But there was also some scoring already on the steel, and that's actually kind of common, that thick traction coatings cover up roughly finished blades from the factory. That was also the case here. Does that interfere at all with performance? No, not really. Speaking of performance, once I got the traction coating off, blade performance significantly improved for me. One of the problems I was having with the traction coating is it was binding through certain kinds of media, like cardboard or going through wood. And now the knife was a lot more slippy and slicey. And the durability problem was gone. Attraction coating was ridiculously easy to damage, and if it got gunky at all, it was almost impossible to clean. It was like trying to clean gunk off 60 grit sandpaper. So now I had a knife that was durable and easy to maintain. I just buffed it and gave it a coat of bottle cold blue. And over the years, I've had to touch it up a bit. If I scuff it, batoning or chopping with it, or maybe it gets stained by something it comes in contact with, it's an easy job to just, buff it off quick and give it another coat. But overall durability and ease of maintenance and sliciness, yeah, definitely worth doing. And I've done it to all my Beckers, spoiler alert. Also, any other knife I encounter that has a traction coating, because I hate those so much. What else did I do to this one, though? All right. You guys know, if you've been watching my videos, that I like finger choils. So I did expand the sharpening notch at the base of the blade into a full-size finger choil. While I was at it, I recoat what was kind of a round and kind of blobby, cheap-looking guard projection here, gave it some angular geometry. There's no function to that. I just think it looks nicer. But one thing that does have functionality. All right, there's a jimping ramp on the back that was originally exactly one notch higher. So I trimmed that down. Got that advice from some other YouTubers. And what that did was gave me kind of a balance of best of both worlds. Allows me to slip my thumb way high up on the back of the blade without the ramp being in the way, but still gives me the best of what that ramp was doing in terms of a place for my thumb to really push against. So I definitely think that worked out. Last thing I did, all right, the original tip geometry was very broad and kind of shovel-like. And I prefer my knives to be a bit pointier. So I took a couple of different runs at this, but final result, fairly complete reprofiling of the tip, both the front and the back edges, to give it more potential for penetration. And we'll see how that works as we go into my usual performance and impact tests. I fully expect the knife will have zero problems. All right, post-tests, any damage? As expected, absolutely zero. Let's break it down. Starting with stabbing and thrusting into my pel with this new and improved tip. It's still more on the shovel end of the spectrum, but I was able to make it work, get some decent penetration out of it. And as for the grip, very secure, not slippy, and no uncomfortable collisions whatsoever. And that included going to the extreme, which I don't recommend, of that saber grip. I do recommend keeping your thumb wrapped around your blade for added security, but I was able to do that pretty effectively and pretty comfortably because of all the shapes and that thumb wrap. So it worked, and that included also in the reverse grip. Okay, I'll get back to transitions here in a second. But second test, chopping into hard bamboo, which is intentionally abusive. I'm looking to see if I can induce a chip or a roll on a fragile edge, and the answer was, in this case, not at all. The edge is perfect. Took it then to shaving, carving some hardwood boards. Fantastic tool for that, and a lot of other things. chopped into the boards. Now it's pretty light and balanced into the hand, and it's not very big, but I was able to do some reasonable chopping on smaller pieces of wood. So yeah, you can use it for that. Speaking of using it for that, batoning through some kiln-dried firewood. Now, in one of those passes, I collided with a pretty stout branch that was going horizontally through the log and got entirely stuck. Had to pry it out, took it from another angle, slid right through. As long as I'm batoning through a log that's narrow enough that I've got blade length that gives me something to baton against, you could make it work. Now, I thought the surface took a little damage from that. It looked scuffed, but it wiped right off. That cold-blued finish is indeed pretty durable, and if it does get damaged, really easy to fix. So is the knife designed for chopping and batoning primarily? Probably not, but yeah, in a pinch, you could do it if the job's not too big. But that also means you get something that's more portable, easier to carry, and you could put it to finer tasks like finer carving or cutting. So yes, I have used this for cutting up cardboard and packaging. I have used it for food prep. So it is a handy tool like this. I cannot deny that this is a high value, durable, useful tool. But it's still not one of my favorites. And that might come down to a couple of things. One, similarly sized BK2 just feels better for me, having that extra mass to do some of those bigger jobs, and also moving it around martially speaking. The blade authority and the balance, even though the shape and length is insignificantly different, for some reason I just like the way the BK2 feels in my hand and moves a lot better. Plus, again, more authority if I'm using it as a chopping or even a prying tool. But maybe it's about grip, point of balance, moving it around. Can you use it martially? Yes. Does it thrust and stab? Yes. Does it slash, stab, and even snap cut? Yes, it does. Let's talk about those transitions, though. All right. Even narrowed out, that grip is still a bit too chonky for me to do my patented finger twirl, which I don't recommend because it's not the most secure way to flip a knife. I've just been doing it for a long time. But pinch flipping. All right, there are some nice shapes here to index on, but with my stubby fingers, that impact tool kind of hexagonal shape at the bottom there does snag, but again, that's because I have really stubby fingers. If you had longer fingers, that probably would not be a problem for you. But for me, it just makes this kind of sluggish, awkward, and I feel like I might accidentally throw the knife out of my own hand in transitioning it back and forth. So that makes it a little less nimble for the things I like to use a knife for, martially speaking. Again, probably not what this is designed to be, but can you use a tool in a pinch for defensive purposes? Absolutely. And could you use this to do that? Absolutely. Is it one of the first things I would pick off the shelf? Still no. Still no. It's definitely improved over what it was stock. I feel like the improvements I made, absolutely worth doing. And we'll take a look at what I did to my other Beckers here in future videos to come real soon. But speaking of what's to come, all right, since I'm just really not connecting with this knife like I feel like I should, I'm going to send it on to a really good friend who feels like he could do those things. Put it to the uses it was designed for, intended for. Give it the love it deserves. And then maybe down the road, we'll get together and do an update. So potential to be continued. But until then, if you happen to have this knife or other Becker products, let's get our conversation going in the comments as usual, or other knives of this size and function. Give me your recommendations. If you want to see more videos on modifications, let me know about that too. As always, though, thank you for watching, subscribing to the channel, following my journey, liking the videos, and I hope to see you back for, well, whatever the next installment is.